It was a morning like any other. Crystal blue skies over New York City. Children were heading to school, Wall Street brokers rushed for coffee, and office lights flickered on in the towers that touched the clouds. No one knew that within minutes, the world would change forever. At 8:46 a.m., the first plane struck the North Tower of the World Trade Center. 17 minutes later, the South Tower was hit. By the time the dust settled, nearly 3,000 people were dead. An entire nation was in shock. But out of that smoke and rubble came a question that has never really gone away. Was 9/11 exactly what it seemed? Or was it something darker? A carefully staged illusion designed to justify war, reshape the world, and keep the truth buried beneath concrete and ash? To understand why people began asking these questions, you have to go back to those first few hours. Television anchors, choking back tears, struggled to find words. Firefighters and police officers rushed into the towers, some never to return. And then, at 9:59, the South Tower collapsed. Not piece by piece, not like a crumbling building, but straight down, as if gravity itself had been guided. For some watching, it looked too perfect, too symmetrical, almost like a controlled demolition. And in that instant, seeds of doubt were planted. The official story came quickly. 19 hijackers, armed with box cutters, had taken control of 4 planes. They were Al-Qaeda operatives led by Osama bin Laden, and their mission was to strike at the very heart of American power. The Twin Towers, the Pentagon, the Capitol. It was clean. It was simple. It gave the public a villain and the government a reason to strike back. But soon details didn't add up. Why did a third skyscraper, Building 7, collapse later that day, even though no plane had hit it? Why did steel beams, supposedly weakened by jet fuel, fall at near freefall speeds? And why, in the days leading up to the attacks, did unusual stock trades suggest that some people knew disaster was coming? Experts were divided. The 9/11 Commission report, released in 2004, claimed there was no evidence of inside involvement. But to skeptics, that conclusion felt more like an answer looking for a question. Independent engineers, architects, even former CIA officials began to speak up. They didn't all claim to know what happened, but many agreed. The official explanation left holes big enough to drive a plane through. Some pointed to Project Northwoods, a Cold War-era plan where the U.S. military once considered staging fake terrorist attacks to justify war. It was never carried out, but the documents existed. And to many, that was proof enough that the unimaginable could, in fact, be imagined. Then came the wars. Afghanistan, Iraq. Hundreds of thousands dead. Trillions of dollars spent, all justified under the shadow of 9/11. And in that, the conspiracy theories found new fuel. Because if the attacks gave the government a reason to go to war, who really benefited from that morning of fire and ash? Defense contractors, oil companies, politicians hungry for power. For some, the motive seemed clear. But maybe the most haunting part of the 9/11 conspiracy is not the questions of physics or politics, it's the human cost. Mothers who kissed their children goodbye and never came home. Fathers whose voices live only on answering machines. Firefighters who ran into towers knowing they might not walk back out. For the families left behind, the grief is infinite. And to suggest the government itself had a hand in that pain. That is why this question cuts so deep. Because if it's true, even in part, then the very institutions meant to protect us betrayed us. So, was September 11th an inside job? The truth is complicated. For many experts, the evidence points clearly to Al-Qaeda and only to Al-Qaeda. But for millions around the world, doubts remain. The videos, the timelines, the unanswered questions. Perhaps the real story is not just about buildings that fell, but about trust that crumbled with them. Trust in leaders, in media, in the very idea that we are always told the truth. 24 years later, the dust has settled. The memorial pools in Lower Manhattan are quiet. Names carved in bronze whispered by families who still grieve. But the question hasn't disappeared. It lingers in late-night conversations, in internet forums, in documentaries just like this. Because 9/11 was more than a tragedy, it was a turning point. And whether you believe the official story or the whispers of conspiracy, one thing is certain. That morning showed us how fragile the world can be, how quickly certainty can collapse, and how sometimes the hardest truth to face is not the one we're told.